And so the next part of the note page says place the following in order from the largest to the smallest. And I'm going to try to make this make the most sense. So here's the order I have across the top here. It's also going here. So you have a muscle, and then you have some, okay, then we have, I was going to go the other direction. Then you have fascicles. You have muscle fibers, you have myofibrils, and then myofilaments. So I have a feeling you're going to be putting these in order at some point in time. So larger is the muscle. And when we say a muscle, when we say like the deltoid muscle, there's a bunch of cells inside there, okay? And there's a bunch of fascicles in there too. So muscle fibers, so when you see that, that just means cell. That is the word. A muscle fiber is just a cell. And the reason they have a special word for it is because it's not the normal round cell that we think of with muscles. It's actually a long cylindrical striated cell. So this is a muscle fiber, but it's just one single cell. That's a little bitty erasure there. So you take a bunch of cells and you stack them together, you get fascicles. You take a bunch of fascicles, put them together, you get a muscle. As you go smaller than the cell, do you remember what was smaller than cells on that organization chart? What was bigger than that? There was one
Organelles.
Organelles. So these myofibrils, this is basically the organelle. So this is the organelle, and inside these organelles, there are molecules. And so myofilaments are basically the proteins that are inside the molecules. So you got, and these are most, and we're going to get to this in a moment, but most of you have heard of actin and myosin. Those are the two main proteins that come together. There are others, but the two main proteins in the two myofilaments, or your thick and thin filaments, which are the actin and myosin, they come together to make the myofibril. And then the myofibrils come together to make the fibers, and the fibers come together to make the fascicles, and the fascicles come together to make what we know as your muscle. So I don't know if y'all can tell, but this is what bone is that? Nobody knows what bone that is?
Femur.
Thank you. That's a femur, ball and socket there. So this could be your biceps femoris or something there hanging off that femur. I don't really know. So anyway, so I found this little thing and I thought this was cool. It says to help you remember which one's in order. Can you see there's a bunch of F words? Myo just means muscle. So myofibril, myo just means a fiber of muscle. So basically, put all these. If you put them in order, the F words, okay, then it goes from an alphabetical order. So fascicle, fiber, fibrils, filaments. You can see it down here. So that helps you learn larger. You just have to know the muscle itself is the largest group. So, all right. It's going to hopefully make more sense as we move along. So these are really pretty pictures I've got going on here. Here's these actin and myosin that's going on here. You take a bunch of the filaments together, you get the myofibril, you get a bunch of myofibrils together, you get a fiber, and then you take a bunch of those together, you get a fascicle, and then a bunch of fascicles together will make your muscle group, essentially. Okay, so then we have these, each one of these, starting with the cell, actually has a connective tissue covering around it. So basically like a wrap. And so we have three different ones. So we're going to start not inside the cell, which that's not the organelle, but the cell itself. And so the cell itself is called the muscle fiber. And so the muscle fiber has a connective tissue around it. Oh, I'm sorry, that went. I thought it was going to go the other direction. We'll just start here. The muscle fiber itself covering has the endomyosin. Endomyosin covers the muscle fiber. The perimyosin is going to cover the fascicles. And then you have something called an epimyosin that covers the whole muscle itself. And then you get a bunch of muscle groups together, you get something called fascia, which we'll do in a second. But can y'all tell what I got in my hand here?
A Twizzler?
Yay, a Twizzler. For some reason, a Twizzler reminded me of a muscle fiber. So, so I came up with this a couple of years ago. It works out pretty well. So this is a muscle fiber. This is actually one of my husband's Twizzlers. Actually, it's a red vine, by the way. But this is one of his red vines I just stole. I'm eating off of one end of it right there. So anyway, so this is a muscle fiber. This is one single cell. So inside there would be where we would find the myofibrils, and then more specifically the filaments, the actin and myosin. But I don't want to concentrate on that. I want to talk about just the cell itself. Okay, so the cell itself, the muscle fiber, has a wrapping around it. So put this one down. This is what I'm eating on because I've already wrapped these up. So I don't know, can you see? I've got some, it's good to be home. I have some saran wrap, okay? So saran wrap is like connective tissue. So the connective tissue, so across my muscle fiber, I've got a wrapping of connective tissue. This is endomyosin. That makes sense? Endomyosin, basically wrapped up my Twizzler. I keep thinking I'm going to do this to my husband, just to irritate him. So this is some Twizzler I had a while. So now here's a muscle fiber. 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 Can you see I got a bunch of muscle fibers? Okay.
Yeah.
This is called a fascicle. A fascicle is basically a bunch of muscle fibers. So muscle fiber, it's got endomyosin around it. Put a bunch of muscle fibers together, you get a fascicle. So fascicles have connective tissue surrounding it. It's going around the fascicle, which is where they get the term perimyosin. Do you see what I just did? I wrapped them all together. This would annoy my husband, by the way. Not that I've thought of it. All right, so around the fascicle is what?
Perimyosin.
Perimyosin. A fascicle is just a bunch of muscle fibers. Around the muscle fiber itself was the endo. This one's not wrapped because this is the one I'm eating. Sorry, but these are. All right, so now this is a fascicle with perimyosin around it. Here's another fascicle. Got a bunch of them in there, okay? If I put these together, can y'all tell that I've got two fascicles here? This would make a muscle. A muscle is a bunch of fascicles, and around that, okay, around that is the epimyosin. So you have the endomyosin. Did I say that right a while ago? I think I did. I don't know. Yeah, the endomyosin around that individual fiber, the perimyosin around the fascicle, and now you've got the epi. Epi means on top of, basically on top of the muscle. So the muscle itself is a bunch of those fascicles now fastened together by that epimyosin. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now look here. I don't know. I didn't do a good job. I do better in class because I'm standing over it. I'm sitting down. Do you see all the end here? Do you see that? Where all this connective tissues come together? That's the tendon, where all that has come together. And sometimes that tendon is cord-like, and we call it a tendon, and sometimes it's flat, and we call that an aponeursis, which is technically a tendon, but it's a flat tendon. So you see all this connective tissue together, they're making the tendon there. The muscle fiber with the endomyosin, a bunch of those muscle fibers are making a fascicle, and that's the perimyosin. A bunch of those fascicles come together, and now you have a muscle, and that's where the epimyosin. So then you get the whole group of muscles that work together, because your muscles always work in groups together. And so if you remember, if you cut into, we didn't really look at the muscles of the rat, but if we had cut into some of those muscles, but anyway, we had lots of connective tissue kind of holding that mesentery stuff holding together is technically the fascia stuff holding all that together. So fascia is going to hold the muscle groups together. So the connective tissue holding entire muscle groups together.